and told me, every time you preach, I cry, so I don't want to cry. They're here, so I can't really talk about them. So I am very emotional as our oldest daughter graduates high school today, as our niece graduates college tomorrow, as our son moves from junior high into high school with his graduation next week. I'm full of emotion, so I am totally 100% whipping out and playing it safe for today. So relax. And as we close out our Future Family Sermon Series, if I asked you to tell me something about your family, most of you would start telling me about your children, or your grandchildren, or your siblings, or your parents. You would naturally focus on your immediate family and stop right there. But if you notice, with advances in internet, technology, and many people have gotten into genealogy and searching to find out their family history. But basically, you are who you are because of the character and the actions of your parents. They are who they are because of the actions and character of your grandparents. We are who we are because of the family members, because of us, whether we are conscious of it or not. We will influence the next 2 or 3 generations of our family by what we say and what we do and who we are. It's funny to think that you are someone else's previous generation. It's funny to think that they will tell stories about you, that you have a future family, and you are in the process of making that future family right here and right now. And when we began this sermon series, I said that there was not one good example in the Old Testament of a healthy family that we would want to emulate. There's just not. But there is one story in the Old Testament about a family that covers about 60 years, that covers over half of the book of Genesis after you get past the creation and all that stuff, that illustrates the power of generational parenting. And I want you to think about that, generational parenting. It's a powerful story. No matter your age, it gets us thinking, whether you're a high school or graduate or whatever, or parent, gets us thinking about what type of legacy am I leaving for the next generation of my family. And part of the story you know, but I bet there's part of this story you might not know. And we're going to go through it kind of quick. I'm not going to read to you over half of the book of Genesis, but this is about the most famous family probably in history, if you will. It begins with Abraham. And Abraham had 2 sons, Isaac and Ishmael. Remember this? And after the whole Abraham going up to the mountain and trying to kill Isaac, that kind of mishap, Isaac has 2 twins, Esau and Jacob. And although they were twins, Esau was the oldest, even by minutes, which meant that Esau was the heir of everything that was Abraham's. He was to receive all the authority of the family, all of the wealth of the family. He would be the judge and conflict decider of the whole family. Jacob goes on and has 12 sons. The famous son being a guy named Joseph. That part, either from the Bible story or the Broadway musical, you know about Joseph. Now, Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. Because the scripture tells us that he is his favorite son, because Joseph was married from Jacob's favorite wife. Okay, think about that. How would you like to be? Oh yeah, honey, you're my favorite wife. Okay, so we got that. So Jacob sends Joseph out to check on his older brothers out in the field working one day. Okay? Now, Joseph goes out. The brothers aren't where they're supposed to be working. So Joseph searches a little bit more through the land, and so he finds them. They see him coming with this Technicolor Michael Jackson looking coat on, and they say to one another, look, when you see that fool a mile away, here comes our little brother. He is going to narc on us. He's going to tell Dad we're not where we're supposed to be. And so one of them, he says, look at him. He's looking all cool, thinks he's cool in his Michael Jackson coat, the dreamer. He thinks he's the only one, and he's not. And he's going to go back and snitch on us. Let's kill him. Glad my brother never came up with that. But instead, they just said, okay, let's not kill him. Let's show some mercy. I'll tell you what, let's just strip him naked, beat him up, and throw him in a well. And we'll take his Michael Jackson coat, we'll rub some of Joseph's blood on it, and we'll put some animal blood on it too, and we won't kill him, we'll just sell him. Okay? And we'll make a little money, we'll take the Michael Jackson rigged up coat back to Dad, and we'll tell Dad that a pack of wolves ate his favorite son. Problem solved, right? No, not necessarily. But when we hear this, and we hear musicals about this, sometimes when we hear these stories, we've kind of romanticized them a bit, if you will. Even a musical was written about this story, and that's fine. But we lose the reality. I mean, we lose the sights. We lose the sounds. We lose the smells. I mean, we forget we have a 17-year-old boy who should be getting ready to graduate high school, and he's in shackles, and he's in the hot, dry sun. He is sold. He's attached to other men and women slaves. He's forced to walk through hindrance conditions. He doesn't know what his life will be. He didn't have any future. He had no way out. Even suicide was not an option in ancient times. Because if you think about it, this will come to you later, you think about it, in biblical times, it really wasn't a good way to even kill yourself. You could hurt yourself, hit yourself with a rock. But I mean, there's just no way to even commit suicide. He was stuck. He was stuck. Hard labor, uncertainty, unknown was the future that lay ahead of this young boy. And then through a string of luck, if you will, he was sold to Potiphar, who was a guard in Pharaoh's army. And through it all, Joseph chose to live his life as if God was with him. Even in reality, it looked like God had totally abandoned him. And in his fate of reality, Joseph never gave up on the pursuit of the ideal relationship with God. Remember, we talked about that. There's the real and the ideal. He never gave up on that pursuit of the ideal with his relationship with God. And then Joseph, being a good-looking guy, gets the attention of Potiphar's wife, and she begins to make sexual advances toward him, and he rejects them. And he actually says, don't touch me, because it will bring dishonor to your husband. Remember, later you're married. But more importantly, it will bring dishonor to my God. You'll get away from me. And then he is thrown in the dungeon. Potiphar believes his wife, throws him in the dungeon. And you got to understand that the dungeon is not like jail. It's not like you can frolic in the ocean or frolic on the beach. There's no trial. There's no court date. There's no release date. There's no phone call or visitation. You are stuck. You are forever waiting for nothing. Nothing. In all of this, Joseph still lived to do the right thing. And in Genesis 39:21, it says, but while Joseph was in prison, the Lord was with him. The Lord showed kindness to him and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison ward. Favored with a prison ward? What? I mean, to the graduates out there, junior high or senior high, I mean, if your lifelong goal and ambition is to be favored by the prison warden, please see me after church. We need to talk. Favored? You've got to be kidding me. Everything in his life at this point did not illustrate favored. So where does Joseph get this kind of faith? So he he's in the dungeon, and we kind of know this going on. And then the most powerful man in all of Egypt was Pharaoh, and he has this dream, and no one can interpret what this crazy, wicked dream he keeps having. And Pharaoh's cupbearer, the guy that tastes the food and the wine before they give it to Pharaoh to be sure it's not poison. I mean, that's your job. If you don't die, then it's okay to give it to the most powerful man. He gets thrown in jail. And in jail, this cupbearer has this crazy dream. And he's like, I don't know what it means. And Joseph tells him what his dream means. And he says, it means you're going to get out of here. And the cupbearer says, well, how can I repay you? How can I repay you, Joseph? And Joseph says, hey, look, when you get out of here, if you could just do me a solid and tell someone that I'm in here. No one, my parents think I'm dead. No one knows I'm here. Just tell someone, anyone, that I'm here. And he says, okay. And so the cupbearer gets out. 2 years go by. 2 years. Guess what? He forgets about it. He forgets. As soon as he gets out and gets free, cupbearer forgets all about Joseph. 2 years go by. Joseph's still having this wicked dream. No one can understand. So the cupbearer is standing near Pharaoh, and Pharaoh is getting upset that everyone cannot interpret this dream. And he's like, hey, Pharaoh, let's not get into details or go over hash all memories or nothing, but remember about 2 years ago when you kind of had me thrown in jail and that old dungeon thing? Remember that? Oh, well, let's not go into that. But what I want to tell you is this Hebrew guy that I met in jail that told me what my dream was going to be, that said I would get out, and I got out. And so he said, I've got this guy, his name's Joseph, I think, Joseph. He interpreted my dream. He can interpret yours. So they go get Joseph, they clean him up, they put on some fine clothes, they feed him some food to fatten him up, so he'll look presentable in front of Pharaoh, the most powerful man in all the earth at that time. Pharaoh tells Joseph his dream, y'all know this part, and asks, can you tell me what it means? And Joseph's response was, no, I can't, but my God can. Oh, that's a huge gasp. We've got soldiers grabbing for their swords. This guy we just plucked out of prison tells Pharaoh, who considers himself one of the gods with a little g, he's telling him how great this other God is with a big G. And that's what we call a no he didn't moment. He did not just say that. No, the guards are ready to attack. And Pharaoh says, look, man, calm down, calm down, calm down. I don't care. I got to know what this thing means. I got to know what this dream means. It's tearing me up inside. So Joseph said, look, it's easy. Well, I hope he didn't say it's easy. He says it's easy. Pharaoh, you're going to have 7 years of more harvest of grain that you'll know what to do with. It'll be more than you've ever had. 7 years, more yields of the crop that you've ever seen. But then, followed by the 7 years, you're going to have 7 years of the worst famine you've ever seen in your life. The whole nation will, the whole country will, the whole world will. And then, in the story, about 2 minutes after meeting Pharaoh, Joseph begins to give Pharaoh some advice. What? He said, look, Pharaoh, look, I'll tell you what I would do. I'd find me an advisor, and I'd put them in charge. I'd have them build huge silos in every major city of your kingdom. And during the first 7 years, I would tax everyone in this country, or in your reign, 20% of their yield from their field. And I'd store it up in these grains. And then if it was me, and then when that famine hits, you know what I would do? I would sell it back to them. Listen to this. I'd sell it back to them for a low dollar. You make some little money, okay? And surrounding countries will come to you, and they will pay high dollar because they're dying for your grain. And all the other countries will owe you something solid because they're indebted to you. And he said, look, you're going to look good in front of your people. You're going to make a ton of money, and you are going to survive. It's a win-win. Pharaoh says, where in the world can I find such a person to run this? And Joseph's like, well, all I got is this dungeon thing going on. I'm kind of free. Why not me? I can free up my schedule. Why not me? So Pharaoh says, so in 15 minutes, Joseph went from being favored by the prison warden to being favored by the most powerful man on the planet. Joseph went from being a prisoner to being the prime minister of all of Egypt, which was the largest country of the time. He became the second most powerful man on the planet in a matter of 15 minutes. So Joseph goes to work, he's building, he's taxing, he's storing up for 7 years, and then on the eighth year, the famine hits, just like the dream predicted. Joseph begins the second part of the operation, which means to distribute and to sell all the grain that they've stored up. And after 2 years of the famine, Jacob, remember Jacob, his father, is forced, because of the famine, to send his son to Egypt to try to beg and borrow and buy some food to keep his family alive. And we pick up the story in the 42th chapter of Genesis, beginning with the first, where here's what's happened. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, why do you keep looking at each other? He said, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so that we may live and not die. And then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his favorite wife, with the others, because he was afraid that harm might come to him. He'd already lost one son. He's not going to lose another. So Israel's sons were among those who went to buy grain. And there was a famine in the land of Canaan also. But Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold grain to all the people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. 22 years since Joseph was sold by his brothers. He is not a 17-year-old little kid anymore. He is 39 years old. He is the second most powerful man in all the world, and his brothers are bowing down at his feet. And at that moment, that 17-year-old kid came back. Their voices were familiar. The terror, the coldness, the beating, the money exchanging hands, them ripping off his Michael Jackson coat, the uncertainty, the last image he had of them as he was shackled with other slaves being forced to march off. That memory that he has all came flooding back. The dungeon, and how he was stuck in the dungeon because of them. And the fact that they wanted him dead at first. It all came back. And now their destiny was in his hands. In his hands. Yes, for little brothers everywhere. Then he remembers something. He remembers something. He remembers something from his childhood. He remembers something from his childhood, and he begins to connect some dots. So hit pause on that right there. Let's go back to Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. Joseph remembers his dad. His dad had a brother, a twin. He remembers he had an uncle, Esau. And Esau was the hunter and the woodsman of the family. And he loved to hunt. And he loved to fish. And he remembers stories about how Esau loved to fight with people and how strong he was. And Isaac was kind of a good chef, or a good cook, if you will. And Genesis tells us that when they were younger, Esau was out hunting for weeks and did not kill anything. And he comes home starving to die. And Isaac is home cooking some delicious stew. And Esau says, please, can you give me some stew? I'm about to die here. And he says, you know, being the younger brother means you get the most out of the deal. And he said, you know what, give me your inheritance. And I'll give you my stew. And hungry, and as teenagers only think about food and loving plus control, and not thinking, he says, yes, sure. So Esau trades his birthright for a bowl of stew. The Bible tells us from that moment Esau despised his brother and his birthright. You see, Esau no longer had any value in the family. Time elapsed. Isaac loses his eyesight, and it becomes time for the family to come one by one in front of Isaac to receive their blessings. And you need to understand that a blessing in that time was a legally binding contract. Fathers would call the family together and they would lay hands on the oldest son and say, all I have is now yours, all wealth, all authority, all leadership, all decisions of the family is now yours. And Jacob, with the help of his mother, puts some animal hair on his back, and he tries to disguise his voice, and he goes in front of his father, Isaac, and he says, it's me, Esau. I've come to give my blessing. And Isaac says, that doesn't sound like you, Esau. And he says, yes, it is. It's Esau. Fill my hairy back. So Isaac, who can't see, he puts out his bag, and he gives Jacob Esau's blessing. And Esau comes in and is livid. The father is confused, and he's like, and mad, and he's like, I can't reverse it. I've already gave it to him. I can't take it back. And from that second on, Esau held a grudge against Jacob because he stole everything I am never, ever, ever going to bow down to my little brother who tricked me. And so Isaac dies, and Jacob gets word, and he runs for his life. And he goes to live with an uncle in a different territory. And his uncle has two daughters, Leah and Rachel. And Rachel can't have any children, so he sleeps with her maidservant. And in the 12 years, he has 11 sons. He also becomes rich with cattle and livestock and tons of children and grandchildren. He gets so big that physically he's running out of room in his uncle's place. And his uncle tells him, look, you got to leave. You got too many people. And God comes to Jacob and he says, go back to your father's land, to your relatives, and I will be with you. Jacob says, you've got to be with me, God, because if I return, I am a dead man. And so are my sons, so are my daughters, so are my servants, so are my herds. Esau will see all this wealth that I'm bringing back, and he will kill me on the spot, and he will take everything I took for him. And see, Jacob's wives knew this story. I mean, the whole family knew this story about Jacob and him stealing from Esau. They knew that Uncle Esau wanted him killed. They knew that Jacob stole the birthright. And they're going back to the land, to that land. Are you kidding me? I mean, don't you remember your brother wanted to kill you? Yes. And Jacob packs up all the herds and all the family members, and like all family, like all families, no families can keep secrets. Don't tell Mom. And Mom already knows. But Esau gets word that Jacob's coming. And Esau has 40 men in his army, and they head out to meet him. And Jacob knows what's about to happen. 400 soldiers can be easily seen from a far distance. So Jacob divides all the children in 4 groups. With the 2 maidservants, he puts them out first. With Leah, he puts in the back, he puts Rachel. And then he divides them up. And in the back, he puts Rachel and Joseph. Yes, I said Joseph. He is the only child out of 11 mentioned by name when this happened. And Jacob walks out in front of the first group with all the groups watching. And as he approaches his brother, Jacob would take a few steps. He would stop and he would bow down. And with soldiers all around him and all this wealth they had, the women and children, they were easy pickings for anybody. And Jacob breaks out in front of all of them and approaches them. And he bows along the way. It was total submission. It was total humility to his brother as the entire family watches closely, because their destiny was in the hands of a man, a family member whom they did not know. Genesis tells us that Esau runs out to meet him. He grabs him and he hugs him and he kisses him and he weeps. And Esau looked up and he said, "Who are all these women and children?" And all of them begin to bow down to Uncle Esau. And whether Joseph remembers the actual event or not, he was told that story over and over and over again growing up. How his Uncle Esau spared his father's life. How his Uncle Esau spared his mother's life and his life. And Joseph knew that if Esau would have killed him, he would have been more justified. He would have been justified. But instead, he chose reconciliation. And that's why, Joseph, you are standing here today, because your uncle chose reconciliation. 30 years later, your brothers are bowing down before you, Joseph. His own brothers bowing down before him with their faces pressed against the cold, hard, dirty floor. Now Joseph has the power of life and death in his hands. And in that moment, with all those emotions coming down, Joseph chose to do exactly what he had witnessed his Uncle Esau do for him. In a moment of crisis, a moment of overflowing emotion, he chose to do what he had seen done to him when he was a child. The story kind of goes on, and Joseph tells his brother, he says, "Hey, look, saying. I may look like an Egyptian. I may walk like an Egyptian. But I am a Hebrew. I am your little brother. And then the brothers really get scared at that moment. And they start crying. And then they have this one big old group hug. And Joseph said, what you did to me, what you did to me, what you intended to do for evil, my God intended it for it to be good. Joseph restored the relationship and provided for everyone, all of his brothers, all of his family. Now the brothers feared that when Jacob died, the father, then Joseph would enact his revenge. But he didn't. What he said that day meant. Thank you for being patient. But that's a very long biblical story to say this. What your children, what your grandchildren, what your nieces, what your nephews see you do will lay the groundwork for what they will do in times of crisis. They may forget what you say, but they will never forget who you are. They will never forget your character. They will never forget your actions when doing the right thing is difficult. They will remember or hear stories, and it will shape their character when staying was difficult, when leaving was difficult, when packing everything up in a car, in a van, and moving is difficult, when running would have been the easiest thing to do. And fathers and grandfathers, what if you are the model on how to manage life for your sons and grandsons? They will take their cue from you. Mothers and grandmothers, your daughters and granddaughters are taking their cue from you on how to dress and handle stress and navigate relationships and how to parent. Chances are what you are now will affect the future of your family. And you may be, or maybe you won't, really be around long enough to see the effects. The decisions you make now will leave an imprint on them and their children. You see, actions don't just speak louder than words. They echo into future generations. Good or bad, you will have actions and that will echo into the next generation of your family and beyond. So what will echo from your life into the next generation? Actions do speak louder than words and will echo through future generations, and it will reverberate into your future family. So reality time. What should you do? What can you do differently? What can you continue to do? What would you change now that would change the trajectory for your future family? Because the future of your family has already begun.